Hi guys, and welcome to the High Man podcast. It is episode 12, hosted by me, Kadok, and Peter. It's currently 12 p.m. on Thursday, the 10th of November. It's starting to get late into the year now. It's a bit weird. But yeah, episode 12, we're going to be talking about the hero's journey, kind of like the archetypical stories that you kind of hear, what the hero's journey is, the origins of it, and then kind of go on some tangents on just kind of do stuff like that. How are we doing today, Pete? All right?
Yeah, pretty good. Good to be back on the podcast as always. So yeah, it should be a good episode today. I think the ideas about the hero's journey links into a lot of the things we spoke about in previous episodes. So it'll be good just diving deeply into it and seeing where we get to.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, should we get started straight away, or is there anything else you want to update anyone on?
Just the usual stuff. Podcast is on Spotify, so go and check us out if you do listen to it. Then give us a 5-star rating as well, because that's always going to be good. It's good to show the sport. And yeah, just thanks for everyone watching recently. The views have been going up a little bit. I don't know if you've been looking at that at all, K-Lock, but it seems as if we got slowly getting some viewers now. So yeah,
That's some traction.
But yeah, let's get into it then.
Yeah, so the hero's journey. It was the term was kind of first coined by a guy called Joseph Campbell. I think he referred to it as like a monomyth, and basically it examines the stages of the hero who goes on an adventure, faces a crisis, and then wins. Following that, they return home victorious. And I think he kind of discovered the idea, I guess you could say, in like 1949 it was. I think he's just a writer who's been heavily influenced by Freud, Jung, and then maybe a few other philosophers that are quite prominent in like psychology. But we're not going to focus too much on him as an individual. Kind of get straight into the stages of the hero's journey, go step by step, and then try and like examine it a bit based on what we've talked about in the previous episodes. So the hero's journey. From what I can tell, there's 3 acts. There's Act 1. Where is it? 1 second, sorry. Yeah, so we've got Act 1, which is kind of stepping out from the ordinary world into the adventure. And then Act 2 is kind of about facing the crisis and overcoming the challenge. And then Act 3 is kind of about returning home back to the ordinary world. And in those stages, we've got different steps that we go through. So step 1, from what I can tell, is the call to adventure. So you're living your life in the normal, going with the status quo, and then the call to adventure is kind of like destiny summoning the hero, and through this, transferring their spiritual center of gravity from within the pale of his society to a zone of unknown. That's how Campbell refers to it. And that's quite an interesting way of putting it. I thought it's kind of like saying, even if a reluctant hero who doesn't want to go on the journey or doesn't feel ready for it, it seems like there'll be like an insatiable itch, because they're not gravitating to where the spirit needs to be, because they're not going on they're not following the call to adventure and going to where it seems like life is trying to bring them. So I thought that was quite a nice way of like summarizing the call to adventure. So yeah, any thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about like what the source of the call to adventure is in the stories themselves, and also like in one's own life, because obviously the story is representative of some sort of journey, or some sort of experience that people will go through in their lives. So it's interesting thinking about the source of it, because I've seen it described that commonly the source in our own life is just a urge, kind of an urge from within, some sort of unsettling feeling from within, that something needs to be done, or something needs to change, or there's something you need to do or pursue. So it can come from within, but I think it can also come kind of in a less, maybe not less voluntary, because the decision to kind of take responsibility and take on the journey is a voluntary decision, but perhaps it's external circumstances that bring it upon you. They because you kind of start off in the status quo kind of normal life, and then it's either some sort of feeling of discontentment that might knock you out of that, or it can be just external circumstances which throw you into chaos. And in that sense, it's kind of less voluntary.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's a guy called Otto Rank who Campbell refers to, and I think this guy Rank wrote a book called The Myth of the Birth of the Hero, and he basically, I don't know which part of the book he describes it in, but he kind of says that every single human has almost already gone through the hero's journey. Like, we've all started from these small little water-born creatures in the fetus. We've come out, born into the world, completely dependent on like a mother, and then we have to become like self-reliant over time and into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess when I think about it like that, it kind of, I don't know if you could say it gives hope, but it kind of like gives the realization that every single human has the ability to do the hero's journey, because we've already kind of done ourselves. Because initially, when I looked at the hero's journey, I thought back to when we talked about like Nietzsche's idea of the higher man and the Übermensch, and like Nietzsche kind of thought that it wouldn't be possible for everybody to like get to a point of self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this like hero's journey kind of, to me, it seems like everyone does have the ability to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of everyone's destiny to go on their own journey. And I've I heard in one of the videos I was watching preparing for this, they said that perhaps like a good life is a repetitive is a sequence of various heroes' journeys. Each, obviously, the value of the hero's journey is in kind of the person you become, the personal development through the trials and tribulations, and also to the better place that you reach once you slay the dragon and get the treasure, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I guess anything else on that step, or do you want to move on to the next?
Yeah, but I think with the call to adventure, it's interesting thinking about whether it's voluntary or not, because people can be confronted by these feelings from within or external circumstances, but they can choose to not rise to it. So it is kind of it's always a voluntary decision to embark on the journey, which I find is quite an important point about it, because you need to confront it. And it had me thinking about the first chapter from Jordan Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life, which is stand up straight with your shoulders back, about how you kind of need to choose to stand up and confront the world. And there's this, I won't get the line exactly right, but there's this line that I really like from it, which is, rather than seeing, you should try and see the treasure that the dragon that the dragon holds, rather than the all too true fact of the dragon, which is kind of seeing the potential that you can overcome and realize by taking on the journey voluntarily, despite the fact that it's challenging, because perhaps we need that reward to motivate us in the face of challenge. And I think if we can embrace like the value of overcoming challenge in terms of personal development and how much it can benefit us, then it kind of justifies the problems being there in the first place, because the value of overcoming them justifies their existence. I think it's a good mindset to have.
Right, yeah. No, it's a nice way of thinking about it. Yeah, kind of like, you don't want to be paralyzed by fear by focusing on the dragon. You want to maintain a focus on the reward and like the personal development that you get from the process.
Yeah. Um,
Nice. Well, saying that, when you get into, when I was looking at this, the hero's journey, kind of researching it, different like people interpret it in different ways and have like different steps. But for me, the step 2 is kind of like the refusal of the call, like the rejection of the call to adventure. This is kind of born out of like fear and insecurity. And ultimately, it is, do you accept the call, or do you forever remain in the ordinary under the illusion of security? And like, I think that kind of leads back into what you're saying about like, do you accept the call to adventure and look forward and see the treasure that could be attained, or do you stay away from the dragon completely because you're paralyzed by fear? And by staying away, you think you're under this illusion of security, but that illusion only stops you from having personal development, I guess.
yeah, that second step actually probably highlights the point even more about it being a voluntary thing, because yeah, in that it's often you reject it first and you try to avoid the challenge because it will be difficult, and we sometimes want to pursue comfort and ease when it's in the face of a challenge. And there's this Jordan Peterson quote. He was talking about, it was on a podcast with the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he was talking about how so some like overbearing parents, and about how it's kind of the child's decision, the child's decision and also the parents' decisions also contribute, but they both have some responsibility there. But it's like, if you stay, then yeah, you, like he said, you might lose your body out there, but if you stay here, then you'll lose your soul. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's a whole thing, a whole line of thoughts I had about kind of what the soul represents in this. And I think because it relates to like the Pinocchio story, how he starts off as this like inanimate object pulled by strings, but then he becomes like a real boy, like a real person, like he develops a soul almost when he decides to take on the challenges of life. And that brings out the potential for him to realize what he could be
mm.
inside. But yeah, there's a lot of ideas moving around there. It's kind of hard to put them all
Yeah.
together.
On a quick tangent, like, would that idea and thought, would that only apply to people that believe in like the idea of a soul? Like, if someone's not like necessarily spiritual or religious, and they kind of believe in like the physical reality of everything, and there's nothing beyond that to them, would this idea of losing your soul really matter to them? Because they'll just be living in comfort and think, well, this is comfort that serves my physical needs. What's the point in going out what's the point in going out on the call for adventure if I'm going to lose my body, and I'm not necessarily going to care about losing my soul if I stay at home?
Yeah, so the question was, does this apply to people who aren't religious? And I think the answer is yes. And it's because this like these religious ideas, as we've spoke about, aren't some arbitrary thing that someone's just come up with. There's actually some meaning and significance to them in a fundamental way relating to the human experience. So like the idea of a soul, it is still, I mean, you don't have to believe in a physical or a non-physical like supernatural like part of yourself which exists within outside the laws of nature in order to understand the value of the soul, in terms of it being like perhaps a divine part within you that is capable of realizing your potential. If you choose safety and avoid risk, then you protect your body but you don't protect your soul. And it's not, maybe even it's not a thing of, because using your body is like, oh, it could be your body if you're taking on a physical risk, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your body that you're putting at risk. But the idea is that you're trying to preserve some sort of, you're aiming for self-preservation and sacrificing your potential for that. And I think that's the thing about it, the soul is and sacrificing your soul is kind of sacrificing the fulfillment that you can get. You know, we've spoke about so much about how living out the values of the higher man, which is, you know, the opposite of comfort and pleasure. It's that it's kind of confront the world, like the value of that in terms of the meaning you feel in your life. So if you make decisions which would mythologically lead to, you know, keeping your soul intact, then that will lead to a more fulfilling life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it's valuable for everyone, even if they don't choose to subscribe to necessarily believe literally in those like mythological terms. It's still, there's the idea of the soul, I think, is still relevant to everyone.
Yeah, maybe it's not confined to like religious philosophies. Yes, the rejection of the call, and then step 3. Yeah, so step 3 is meeting the mentor. I didn't really make any notes on this, but I kind of thought like there's a lot of cases and like examples of people having the call to adventure, going on it and completing it successfully, and there's them not necessarily having like a mentor or like figure or idol that they can look up to and take guidance from. So I don't know how necessary it is for a hero to have a mentor on their journey. I know it would definitely help everyone. Like that's not a question that can be refuted, but like, is it necessary, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, in these stories, it's always, I feel like it's always represented as an older, wiser. It's often an animal for whatever reason, but it's just like this, some wise old fella. But yeah, I don't know if it's absolutely necessary. Like
Maybe do you think? Sorry, like, maybe in my mind, I'm defining the mentor as like a physical human who you look up to and actually talk to, but maybe the mentor can be like transformative and can be something like Mother Nature, or I don't know, it could just be anything really.
Yeah, perhaps a mentor could even be like a personification of your own conscience. I think there is different stories where there is kind of a mentor like creature, or there's some sort of creature. Like I'm thinking of in Lion King. There's one character I remember Jordan Peterson talking about how it's like a little monkey type thing. I can't remember his name, but he's like the conscience, and it also in Pinocchio, like Jiminy Cricket acts as the conscience. But what exactly do you think the role is of the mentor? Like, what value do you think that provides the hero? Why, like hypothetically, would it be necessary for their journey to have some older, wiser person to give them guidance?
I feel like maybe the mentor isn't necessarily like its prime purpose might not necessarily be to give guidance, but maybe more so like reassurance. Because it seems to me like the call to adventure is about going on this journey, being faced by challenges and getting things wrong and overcoming them in the future. So you don't necessarily need to be guided, because you kind of guide yourself through trial and error. Whereas maybe the mentor just kind of gives you hope, allows you to feel okay about getting it wrong, and just gives you reassurance that you can go and get it and do it right again.
Yeah. So perhaps it's not so much the exact knowledge that they have, that they're not providing you with necessarily knowledge that will help you, but they're providing you with kind of, I guess, moral support, or it kind of feels like they steer you in the proper direction. Like, for example, I feel like there's often in if they were to kind of reject the call to adventure, then the wise old fella would give them the encouragement they need, maybe to see it from a different perspective and think, hold on, this is the journey that I need to go on. So just like kind of pushing them in the right direction when they need it.
Yeah,
And maybe someone to go back to. I guess a mentor kind of acts it's like a father figure as well, which is an interesting thing. Maybe that's it's representing like the need for some sort of encouragement um, to confront the challenge, and also maybe reassurance during the failures, but also to push you and say you can't give up, that type of thing. But perhaps
yeah,
more moral support is what you were saying.
mm. Yeah. I mean, someone else might have some other ideas that conflict with what we said, but from what I've gathered, that's maybe what it could mean. Well, to me anyway, that's what it means.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Moving on to step 4, I've got it as crossing the threshold. To me, that like well, what I've read, it signifies the hero's commitment to the journey. They've made the decision. I'm going to answer this call. I'm not going to go in this direction of chaos and face the challenges that it presents.
Yeah. It's that voluntary step into the physical action of stepping into the chaos, leaving
Yeah,
this order behind, and it's kind of the real, I guess, where the real beginning of the journey takes place when they
yeah.
take that
That's the
step.
first kind of
Yeah,
part of the transformation.
yeah, taking that step into chaos. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's
very
quite a
cool.
simple one.
Yeah,
The next one I've got step 5 is tests allies, and enemies. Um, and it says where I read it says kind of like this is where you kind of get tested and you kind of try and figure out who's your enemy and who's your ally. But one part of that it said is that your friends and family, although with good intentions, they can be the ones to hinder your development. Because few people complete their own hero's journey to maturity, so they unconsciously try to sabotage you.
yeah,
So this step is necessary it's necessary and critical to learn who is to be trusted. So, what
yeah.
are your ideas and thoughts about that?
That's interesting. I do always I try to think, something I've realized maybe a couple years ago or something, and I try to always consider this when I'm maybe getting advice from people or even giving advice out myself, which is people always give they give advice based on their own assumptions and their own positions, and to some extent the advice they give is just going to be confirming the biases of them wanting to think that they did the right things themselves. And
Mm.
so yeah, I think it's important to question, when people are trying to advise you, even if you believe it's from a good-hearted place, whether the assumptions are, you know, in line with what you really value, or whether they're just based out of biases. Basically, you just need to consider the advice people are giving you and understand, okay, let me look at the way this person's lived their lives. And obviously, they'll rationalize why they've made the right decisions, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are, because everyone just wants to validate kind of what they've done. And I notice this when I'm doing it. Like, if someone asks me for advice about something, I'm like I'll give them the advice because they're asking me, so obviously you're going to offer your opinion. But I'm like, okay, I also understand that my beliefs are going to be somewhat aligned with what I've done, or so or the position I'm currently in, trying to. So yeah, I think it's important to realize receiving advice from others and also yourself, whether your own, for example, the trouble here is your own. For the hero would be someone else's own limiting beliefs. They're projecting that onto you. So
Mm.
that is the thing to try and avoid. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's quite interesting because like this third year in university, we've been learning. Well, it's just been the classic learning with a module, but the big step up from second and first year is critically evaluating sources more. And like it links literally to like I don't really think you could apply it to humans, but you learn in uni, you need to critically evaluate where this academic journal is from. Does the author have a bias towards this or that? And like I guess like you just said, you can apply that to every single person. like look at their experiences in life, where they've kind of headed from and headed to, and then think, is that a sort of life that I want to align myself with?
Mhm.
So I should take their advice in this way or that way. But no, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about like if other people, like if someone gives you advice which is some sort of limiting belief, any sort of saying, be like you can't reach this goal, or you can't do something, like is it ever good to listen to that advice? Some might argue, oh, it's good to have that advice in order to be realistic, like that's the argument they'd give. But you know, perhaps realistically we don't really know what the possibilities of reality are. So any sort of trying to tip the balance in favor of pessimism, perhaps this lofty goal you have you'll never reach, but even tipping the balance in favor of pessimism isn't going to be positive for you, and perhaps that advice is very rarely ever worth following. What do you think?
Uh, I think there needs to be like an assessment of like the risks, because realistically, if you have this idea in your mind, you've got this hike quite, it seems like unattainable goal. The act of going towards that goal transforms you like personally and develops you in such a good way. But even if you like don't reach that goal, as well as getting the transformation personally, you might also like achieve the goal just shy of the target. So you're
Yeah.
still going to be really successful. But I think the measurement of the risk is like definitely important, because if you say want to set up a business and have £1 million in revenue in 2 years, but then you're only getting 100 grand, that's still amazing. But if there's a risk of you investing like your whole life savings, that needs to be like contemplated.
Mm.
You can't just think, oh, I've got this goal, I'm going to go for it. Someone needs to put you in check and say, well, have you done any business courses?
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
you got any experience with anything in the business world? Like, do you even know how to start it up? So that needs to be there needs to be checks and balances before you kind of start on those like journeys towards your goals. But I don't know. I guess maybe I'm a little bit pessimistic sometimes, and I would be a little bit self-limiting maybe. But I think it is realistic, and I think it's kind of a good thing for safety.
Yeah.
But
Try,
does that go against the hero's? Does that go against the hero's journey?
well, perhaps, making decisions for safety, maybe that goes back to protecting your body, but you're sacrificing your soul, your calling. You're not deciding to follow your destiny, the call to adventure within you. Perhaps you choose not to follow that because you think it's unsafe, or the risks are too much. But perhaps in saving your metaphorical body here, you're sacrificing the potential of fulfilling the divine part within you, and fulfilling your destiny in a way. I mean, I was
Yeah.
talking in very mythological like ways here, but
No, you could. I mean, for that business example, you could easily apply it. Like, maybe it's not about losing your physical body. Maybe it's something that's also tangible, such as money.
yeah,
Like, you invest your life savings, you're going to lose that if you don't do a good job.
yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
guess,
That's the same idea. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I guess maybe extending what I was saying, you need to take into account the risk of failure of the goal, but then you also, like you said, need to take into account the risk of just staying at home and losing your soul. So that needs to be weighed up against the others.
yeah. And I guess perhaps it would depend on someone's temperament. Like for some people, they may naturally be more risk averse, and I'd probably say on average, people typically are more risk averse, and it's kind of because like the monster isn't as scary as the monster you don't know. So you look at, okay, I maybe have this motivation to maybe do something else, like it could be a change in career path, but then you consider all the risks with changing career and pursuing that path. But it's easy to be blind to the risks that of staying on the path you're currently on, because you're currently on that path, so the risks have kind of already been ruled out and considered. But realistically, if we take a step back and compare them, perhaps the risk of not following one's call to action is greater than the risk of doing it. I prefer to think like that. I think it's I guess it's more ambitious way to think, but perhaps it is realistic to some extent, and unrealistic to some extent, and maybe it's just more on a situational basis. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, if it comes back to a more general theme. I mean, we're going off on a tangent here, but like, should you try and treat your life like people kind of get caught up in the day-to-day actions, just doing what they do? Like, should you try and treat your life like a hero's journey? Like, you have this call to adventure and you're like, yeah, I need to follow this like it's my destiny, and even if I die in the process and sacrifice my body, then it'd be worth it for fulfilling my soul, because that's what that was a calling from within, and I'm not going to betray that for the sake of self-preservation. Like, should we treat our own lives like a hero's journey?
I think it's important to do that, but like, could you treat it in the way of, like Jocko Willink talks about how discipline equals freedom. If you have every day where you're not that you necessarily do the same thing every day, but you tick off the same things that need to be done every day, like you work out, you eat healthy, you get work done every day. That's, to me, is not necessarily the hero's journey, but you can become successful over time, and you kind of can get the sense of fulfillment from it.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I also believe that, like, success over time, which looks like it came about as an event, is actually a process of probably years and years of making the right decisions. So I guess maybe it would come down to, okay, you have this lofty ambition that you're willing to take the risk to pursue, but how does this fit into your daily routine? Like, are you just attracted to the idea of it rather than actually wanting to put the work in to do it? So perhaps it's a thing of, you shouldn't sacrifice your goals, or you shouldn't refuse the call to adventure for the sake of, because it will be difficult, but you need to be realistic about, okay, I know it's going to be difficult. Like, I can't just throw everything away if I haven't even proved to myself that I can take the daily actions that that would get me to that lofty goal. So yeah, it's probably important to break down the bigger picture of taking on something into the daily routines, and maybe focus on the daily routines more, rather than spending your mind too much in this abstract place of, like, oh, I want to achieve this lofty goal, I'm on this journey. Like, perhaps it's good just to be, but maybe it varies. At times in your life you want to be in this, like, kind of robotic mode of just executing the actions on a daily basis, whereas at other times in your life you might need that extra kind of motivation or ambition to take big actions, which are sometimes necessary.
Yeah, I guess the trouble with living in a robotic existence and doing the same things that need to be done is your life becomes too ordered, and you need chaos in your life for it to be, I don't know if you, like, just interesting, I guess you could say.
I think, well, maybe that's what it all comes down to, like those fundamental themes of order and chaos, that too much order is bad and also too much chaos is bad, which links a lot into the hero's journey, because kind of starts in a place of order, then you need to take a step out to chaos, and through that chaos brings risk, but it also brings potential, and then the aim of the chaos is to bring yourself to a new place of order, but that order is better than the previous one. But yeah, does it, like, in terms of like the robotic state, like, I think about going to the gym, and like, I feel like the majority of the time, the best way to be is in that robotic state. You eat what you need to each day. You do the training sessions you need to do each week, and you wait and you do that for a year, and you're like, fucking hell, like I've come a long way. But it's because those daily actions, which might sort of not seem heroic in and of themselves, but yeah, that's what builds success over time, is those daily actions. So yeah, we need to break down these bigger goals into daily actions, and maybe not to get too ahead of ourselves with the vision. Like you need that abstract vision to perhaps give you something to aim towards, but then you need to break it down to the daily routines and decide, okay, am I actually going to do this? Is it possible? Is it like logistically possible? Like what steps would I hypothetically do to get there? And you might not know everything, but if there's not even a roadmap for you to get there, then perhaps you don't want to live in a fairy tale. Yeah.
I remember I was listening to a podcast with Paul Check and Kyle, I think it's Kingsbury, who was a UFC fighter and like one of the founders on it. And their podcast was about the hero's journey. I don't think they didn't necessarily go through it step by step like that. They kind of talked about their own lives and stuff. But I remember what I was listening to earlier, and they were saying like an overnight success in a business, like it's easy, but everyone thinks it's easy, but an overnight success realistically just takes 20 years. It's just it was just sort of a comical way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of refers to what you were saying just then. Like you can get this realization of looking at your body and feeling fit and healthy and strong after a year of going to the gym, and you might only realize that after looking at like a before and after picture. But it's the year of day in day out, maybe with some rest days in between, hopefully, of like grinding that gets you to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of ideas there. Should we move on to the next step? I've got some thoughts about some other stuff, but maybe let's continue to build up a picture of the entire hero's journey.
Yeah, so step 6, we've got the approach to the innermost cave. So from what I understand, the cave represents kind of like feelings maybe of like shame and guilt. One interpretation I saw was that for most men, the cave is the mother complex, and it's like a regressive part of them that seeks to return to the safety of his mother. And like, but then to me, that seemed like a bit of a generalization. Like most individuals will have differing fundamental like internal struggles, but like maybe there is like a common theme between all men and maybe all women, or like different ages, that like the innermost cave does represent. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, does the cave have a different meaning for everyone, or is there kind of like these common themes that different groups of people will share?
Yeah, it seems, the way you're describing it there makes me think of in Fight Club, how the narrator resists the change that Tyler Durden is trying to create for the sake of goes back to self-preservation. And perhaps, I mean, it'll be different for different people, but perhaps going into that cave is being confronted by the vices that currently hold you back. So you've decided to embark on this journey, but in doing so, shit doesn't get easier as soon as you start the journey. As soon as you take the call to adventure, like usually it gets worse before it gets better. Like there's a story from the Bible, I want to say it was like Abraham or something, that basically he was living at home till he was like 40 or something, or like 80. Like the ages are weird in the Bible, but he was living at home basically, like for the sake of modern times, just in his mum's basement playing video games, eating Cheetos. That's like the stereotypical image, that's the archetypal image of what he was doing. But then basically when he goes out into the world, like the first thing he's confronted by is like betrayal and evil and his own inadequacies. So it's this idea that in taking a step to fulfill your destiny, things often get worse before they get better, because you kind of confront the maybe the worst part about is realizing your own inadequacies, and in terms of in a cave, that can be the vices that have held you back in the past, and but you might not have realized, but now you're taking on this journey, it's become apparent that there are these things here that you need to overcome.
Yeah. Does that, once you've taken the voluntary step to accept the call to adventure, does the approach to the innermost cave and like the entrance of it, does that need to be voluntary as well, or do you think that kind of comes with the journey, regardless of if you want to voluntarily look like introspectively at yourself?
I think this part is like, once you've taken the step into chaos and you've decided to take on the challenge, that's a voluntary decision. But in making that voluntary decision, you'll inevitably be confronted by your inadequacies. So yeah, if that's what this inner cave represents, then yeah, I don't think that part of the journey is voluntary. The realization, the inadequacies being exposed is not voluntary. But I guess what you end up doing with that, like some people might give up at that point, and go on not to complete the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I'm not actually sure if, because this innermost cave type thing, I don't know if this is the same idea or whether it might come in somewhere in one of the later steps, but it's the idea that like the thing you most want to find will be in the place you least want to look. So you'll need to descend into the darkness, to, like in Pinocchio, he goes into the belly of the whale where he sees his father. So to realize your potential, you need to go to the deepest depths of what you're afraid of, and confront your inadequacies as intensely as possible. I don't know if that's like what the next steps that you've got down, because that might actually go into something different.
So step 7 after that would be the ordeal, like kind of like the big event, like the major obstacle confronts the hero. The future looks dim, and then in these moments of despair, the hero must like access a hidden part of themselves. Like they call on an inner power they didn't know they possessed to find their way out of the belly of the beast. Like people reference like you get this finding of like unknown energy, creativity, faith, or strength. That's like step 7. Step 8 would be the reward. Like once you've slain the dragon, you are presented with the treasure and prize. Step 9 is the road back. So I think that's just kind of the commitment to get back to normal. Well, not get back to normal, that commitment to finish the journey in its entirety. And then step 10, these last few steps I've got a bit confused, but step 10 was the resurrection. And that's the final test presented to the hero. And that can be a showdown between the hero and their shadow.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets into like Jung's idea of the shadow, and people like not necessarily knowing the deepest, darkest depths of themselves. And then step 11 was return home with the elixir. Sorry. And then step 12 was just back to the status quo.
Yeah.
So we can roll back onto step 7, but are they similar to what you've got?
Yeah, let's go. Well, so what I was talking about, how you need to descend into darkness and take on the biggest challenge to realize the biggest reward. I think that's maybe more part of confronting the dragon. Like that's the dragon represents the biggest challenge, well, okay. So there's a part of the journey that I think is usually there, which is, I don't know exactly where it fit into those steps you've just stated, but it's where the hero, in their, perhaps in taking on the journey, they have this initial enthusiasm, and then they go on to take on the dragon, but they get defeated the first time. So like in the steps I got down just off the video I watched, I wrote them down, it'd kind of come into So there's the trials and tribulations type bit. Then there's the approach and then the crisis. So the approach is the initial confrontation with the big challenge, the big enemy, the dragon. The story I think of with this is Star Wars in the original trilogy. So basically, Luke, after his initial training, goes and faces Darth Vader, and he gets his arm chopped off. And that's the descent, and that's being defeated initially when you try and confront the dragon. Like there's that initial defeat. So yeah, where do you think that kind of fits into the steps? Is that maybe part of the ordeal?
Yeah, I'd say it'd be part of the ordeal, because like the ordeal doesn't necessarily say you're presented with this challenge and the future looks dim, but you succeed. Like it could mean that you fail at first, like in the example of Luke Skywalker, he gets his arm chopped off. That's part of the ordeal, but the ordeal extends to him going back, training some more, and then finding this faith and strength, and then coming back and obviously doing the work he needed to do.
Yeah.
So maybe that covers. Maybe that's that whole thing is still in the ordeal. I don't think the ordeal's as black and white as you either fail and you go home from the hero's journey, or you succeed and carry on to the next step. I think it can kind of be. It could even go on like 4 or 5 times. Like you kind of try, fail, try again, fail, try again, fail. But each time you get like those incremental improvements. So maybe that's what the ordeal is. I think in most movies and stories, it's kind of presented as one like situation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I do think it is a common thing, and it is a fundamental part of the story that when the hero first goes to confront the enemy, they are defeated the first time. Maybe they were too weak, they were arrogant, they were naive, and I do think that is a fundamental part of the hero's journey, that when they initially, so they've stepped out into chaos and they've had a few trials and tribulations, they've been guided by the wise man, but at first they're defeated, and then they have to go back to the drawing board, and then because of that defeat they then go on to become stronger, and then they go back and defeat the villain the second time.
Right, yeah. No, that makes actually more sense. Sorry.
Yeah, I do think that's, and yeah, that would be a further descent. So you've taken on this journey, you've dealt with some trials and tribulations, maybe you've made some progress in that, so you deal with some, you have some trials and tribulations, so it goes, maybe gets slightly worse, and then you overcome them, so it gets slightly better, but then you go to confront the biggest villain, and then you lose, and that's like in the 12 stages that I got, one, so it was approach and then crisis. So like the crisis is probably the lowest point of the journey, which is kind of middle of the journey when they've initially made some progress, but they've, like the challenge was too much, and then they descend into the lowest darkness, and maybe that comes back to the idea of, the potential being found in in the lowest place. What you most want to find is in the lowest place. So I think this is really well demonstrated in the Pinocchio story. That's at least the story I've kind of learned to understand it through, because Pinocchio finds his father in the belly of the whale, and I think what the father represents is the ancestral potential within him, because basically I think it's been shown that this is something Jordan Peterson talks about. I think he learned this from Sam Harris, that when you take on a new challenge, genes inside you activate which previously would have been dormant. So in order to activate the part of yourself, the ancestral potential stored in your DNA, you need to confront the biggest challenge possible if you want to maximize that. So that's why he finds his father in the belly of the whale.
Right.
And then I guess this leads into the next step. Well, yeah, I'm not sure exactly where that Pinocchio thing fits in, but I guess that leads into, I've got it written down as like the return here. So that's like when after you've overcome the biggest obstacle and you've succeeded, then there's like the journey back. I don't know what you put it down as.
Mine is step 7 would be like the ordeal, which I think it would refer to yours as the crisis. And then after that, it was steps 8, which was the reward.
The treasure, yeah, yeah.
And then after that, the road back. And then, but I got confused because it said the road back, and then for me, step 10 after the road back was the resurrection, and that's like the test of like the showdown between the hero and the shadow. Do you want to get into that, or do you want to go on to the road back first? Or?
Have you got much to say about the road back? Like, what do you think? Where do you think that road back is? So?
I think it's kind of just a commitment to finish the journey. I think maybe it kind of represents that you're not necessarily just gonna like lavish yourself in enjoyment because you've defeated the dragon. Like there's still work to be done. You need to get back to life and like kind of get back into the order of things. So that it's the commitment of not like relishing yourself in victory maybe, and like kind of keeping yourself humble and like doing out what you set out to do, even if it's menial, like finishing the journey.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it anyway.
That makes sense. And yeah, that leads into the resurrection. So yeah, so they for some reason they die and they have to die and reborn. Perhaps that means the part of themselves that previously, the part that was in the, what's it called, like the cave, something cave, like that part of themselves, the inadequacies, like at this point in the journey, those things die, and there's like confrontation of death and kind of the resurrection. It reminds me in Fight Club how like at the end, it's interesting in Fight Club because I feel like in these heroes journeys, like there's these different steps, but sometimes comes in different orders, depending on the story. Because in Fight Club, what happens is he hits rock bottom, and then once he's hit rock bottom, that's when the death and rebirth happens, because he shoots himself in the face and he allows Tyler to die, but he's now integrated the hero into himself. So yeah, it's interesting how it's sometimes different. What do you think? Why do you think the resurrection is such something that seems to be in every, like all these kind of stories? Like what is so fundamental and important about death and rebirth at this stage in the journey?
Well, based on like what Joseph Campbell was saying, I saw that video of him talking about it, and like he kind of said, like he thinks like as a child you grow up and you have to give up your childhood and become an adult, and you have to allow the infantile personality / psyche to die. So you go from a psychological dependency to psychological self-responsibility, and that requires death of the previous state of being and then the resurrection of the new self. I think it's, even if it's not, even if you can't really see it as fundamental to stories, like it's fundamental to like just like biology. Like we've got so many cells in our body that die, and then they kind of, not that those specific cells come back to life and like things like that, but like it's just so necessary for things to go through the cycle of life, die, become like, what's the word? Become like fertilizer for other things to grow, and then out of their death and decaying like organisms allows new life to flourish. So it seems it's just something that's part of life in every single respect, like physically and spiritually. So I think that's probably why it's part of every story that has a hero's journey.
Yeah, you describe it as like the cycle there, and kind of that's like what the like in the video I saw, it had the 12 steps of the hero's journey like as a clock.
Yeah, yeah, I've got that as well.
Yeah, so it goes back around. So I guess after everything that's happened, after everything that you've overcome, the highs and the lows of it, in returning from that, you need to you're reborn as the person that you could be. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting that there needs to be a death and rebirth. Like
maybe.
it's not just a linear thing of like the story goes through, and as the story as there's highs and lows, you get that personal development, and then you just finish the story on top. There needs to be that death and rebirth. Um,
Yeah, I think maybe it's also necessary because you go through the hero's journey, you develop yourself like in such ways that you maybe didn't think possible before. But like humans kind of act, well, in my opinion, they kind of act on like an environmental basis and like what conditions are presented before them. So if you go through this hero's journey, you kind of develop a little bit. If you go, if you finish that journey by getting back into the status quo and like back into the order of your normal life, I feel like there's a high risk of just falling back into your old self because of the conditions that you put yourself back into. Whereas when there's like an actual death,
yeah,
a separation from the previous state of being, when you like transform yourself into that higher state of being, even if you do go back into those conditions, like the status quo, there's less risk of you falling back into those old habits, maybe.
yeah, yeah. It's no, that makes perfect sense. That the before you can return back to the status quo, you need to die, and then the parts of yourself, only the parts of yourself that served the journey and that allowed you to be successful, should go to live on. So that's like the burning off of the inadequacies that held you back. So when you return to the real world, you're not just, those things don't come back up. Which kind of brings us into, so what have you got as the last couple of steps?
Step 11 was return with the elixir, and then step 12 was just back to the ordinary world, into normal life again.
Yeah.
What
So
about yourself?
what's the yeah, I've got down, yeah, resolution and then status quo. Um,
Yeah, I didn't really understand the return to with the elixir. I think it kind of just means like you basically take all the good things that you've learned from the journey, have those as a medicine, like elixir almost, that you like treat yourself with, and I don't know.
what is that? What elixir means? Like a medicine?
Yeah, it's like a, I think it's like a liquid. Double check. It's like a liquid medicine or something. Magical potion. That's it. Like a magical or medicinal potion.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah. The hero just returns to the ordinary world as a changed person. And then their return brings hope to those back at home, and
Yeah.
like shows a chance at new beginnings.
Yeah.
So maybe from the elixir that influences people around them. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like a healing. So in the pain and suffering that you felt and the development you've come across, you like one of the things you get from that is this like healing potential for for to help other people. Uh, maybe that's what it means. It means once you've gone on this personal transformation, it then puts you in a position where you can help other people. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because part of the like journey is is like when I think about kind of the basic hero's journey, like we've gone through maybe more steps than the simplest way, but like the hero goes out, he's confronts the dragon, he slays the dragon, takes a treasure and brings the treasure back to the people, and then he's celebrated as a hero. um like yeah, so bringing back this healing thing is maybe one thing, but it's also just bringing back the treasure. But maybe the treasure is the healing, which is the ability to help other people. Maybe that's all
Yeah,
treasure you get from the personal development. Maybe that's what that means.
yeah. Maybe the list could refer to the secrets and perspectives learned along the journey, and those can be taught to people without them necessarily going on the journey. Although they won't get the full benefits of the journey,
Yeah.
because the true treasure is the personal like transformation rather than
Yeah.
the actual physical tangible treasure.
And then it all comes back around to the status quo, which I mentioned this briefly earlier, but so you start off in an order, but then something comes up which brings discontentment, whether that's comes from within or externally, and then you depart into chaos, and then through that chaos you realize the potential, then you enter back into an order, but higher order, a improved state of being, but with the parts, with what needed to be integrated based on the call to adventure, like those things are now integrated into the order, but you had to dive into the chaos to get that, which just
Yeah,
phenomenal idea, I think. Very
yeah.
insightful idea.
The way that it's presented as like a cycle, like as a clock, that I like that quite a lot, especially when you said earlier at the start, you referred to some people, maybe yourself included, believe that like individuals' lives are just a series of heroes' journeys that happen one after the other,
Yeah,
and that's quite nice when you think about it as a cycle where you end up back at the status quo, obviously with a new
but it's
perspective on
better.
life. And
So the journey's made worth it for the fact that it's better, but that process never finishes. Maybe.
yeah, they can just continue going on and on and on.
Yeah.
I think I saw one picture where it was like you started at the point and then you went round, but it didn't necessarily loop back onto that singular point. It kind of looped back round. It was kind of like what's that is it Pythagoras where he had like it's like a
Um.
do you know what I mean?
The golden ratio type thing.
Yes, that was it. It kind of looks almost like the golden
What's
ratio
that
where you
called?
started at this point.
Ah,
Uh,
fucking Fibonacci sequence, is it?
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. But yeah, so you kind of start at this point, you do the journey, loop round, and then you finish at a point just above it, and that
Yeah.
possibly becomes the new status quo.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good way. That's a good way of thinking about it.
yeah, and then I guess that if it actually keeps happening and happening, like obviously, you're going to become pretty successful or pretty transformed, shall we say?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's basically all the steps. Um, I don't know. Do you think every individual has the potential to go on the hero's journey? Well, okay, no, a question before that. To what extent is something a hero's journey? Like, can it be something quite simple as, like, for example, as getting up and going to school or something like that? Like, someone's got like well, I guess if someone's got like a lot of anxiety about going in public, that is quite an extensive example for them. But
Yeah.
like, how far can you dumb it down? Not dumb it down, but simplify it. Sorry.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking about it on different scales, because maybe perhaps like every step within like a larger hero's journey is almost a hero's journey within itself. Like something I thought of was about Andrew Huberman talks about how, like, obviously it's good to have, like, if you have a big vision that really motivates you and you'll really care about the outcome, then you'll get more dopamine from the same action if you didn't believe that the outcome was good. So you'll be able to endure more and push harder, and you'll get more enjoyment and fulfillment out of something, even if it's the exact same thing you're doing when you have a big vision. But something he also said was that for people who, it's sometimes difficult to really associate little actions with a big vision, but by he described it as like I think he said like closing the dopamine loop. So basically, even just deciding, okay, like advice for a depressed person who can barely get out of bed, or someone who's just not motivated to do work. Like if you get up, make a cup of coffee, drink the cup of coffee, clean the cup and put it away, like that in itself, you've chosen to do something and then you've done it, and that kind of closes the dopamine loop. So thinking about it like a cycle, like that's one loop. And then he said, so from closing that loop, you've given yourself a boost of dopamine, and that allows you to think, now you've got a bit more enthusiasm in general, you can start thinking, okay, like what's the next thing I do, what's a bigger challenge I can take on. So that kind of, I'm not sure whether this directly link you directly describe that as a hero's journey, but it does make me think of that, the idea of that loop, how so you go on a loop and then it doesn't end at the same place, it goes to a higher place, and then you can look out and think, okay, there's more, like because I've done that little loop there, I've got myself going, now I can have the potential to do more. So that's like a really small scale like realization of the potential, and
Yeah.
there certainly is a lot of power in the small actions that people take.
No, I agree. It's kind of like when Jordan Peterson talks about having these big tasks in life. If you can simplify those tasks and break them down into smaller, achievable tasks, you do the first one that you can do. That sets you up to achieve the second task, which you wouldn't have been able to think that you could do without achieving the first task. And maybe that's like what the hero's journey is about. It's about doing these small things that might seem menial to other people, but as an individual, your capability is only going to be able to be stretched as far as this singular hero's journey right now, even
Yeah.
though someone else might achieve that in a second. But then you achieve that first journey, sets you up to achieve an even greater journey. So maybe my question shouldn't have been like how far can you simplify it, because that will kind of take a objective like viewpoint, and I think the hero's journey is very much subjective when it comes to the individual.
Yeah.
Because some small task for one person can be a huge accomplishment for another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's obviously lots of value on that, but I guess you can think about, like, we've gone through this whole hero's journey, and that it's like that's kind of just like a two-step process, choosing something to do and then going out and doing it. Whereas this more wide, bigger vision of a hero's journey has many steps, where it's like the arc of the story, it's all complete in and of itself. So yeah, it's obviously very valuable. I'm not sure you could exactly describe it as a hero's journey, but that kind of looping back and realizing more potential each time, like that idea is quite similar. And then so you went on to, so initially, did you put the question, okay, is everyone capable of hero's journey? Do you want to answer
Yeah,
that?
that was I think everyone's capable of a hero's journey, but just based on like the natural distributions in life, like when it comes to like maybe the IQ or like resources between different groups, it seems like the extent of the accomplishment for most people won't be that great, or maybe it's just not that great at the moment because of the conditions that we live in. But for like a real true hero story that's like almost inspirational to someone, and like when you listen to it and you hear about it, you're just like, wow, that's some real achievement. I don't think that many people would actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to say how do you measure if someone thinks that's like a real big achievement, because that's just a subjective like measurement in itself.
Yeah, I guess, well, perhaps we can look at the specific steps of the hero's journey to think, okay, well, does everyone get on a hero's journey? And so we talk about the call to adventure. You don't have to answer the call to adventure, and perhaps many people live lives of quiet dissatisfaction because they don't answer that internal calls to adventure that confront them. And perhaps if you do that for long enough, then that becomes a habit, and you never do. You live a life not really, without really. It goes back to this kind of collective unconscious idea, how there's these things which are kind of fundamental that we need, and when this desire comes up in us, that is the step we need to take forward, and perhaps not everyone takes that step forward. And yeah, it's difficult because it's an abstract idea, and trying to compare it to the nuances and the parts of humans' life. Like you look at someone's life and you could think like they just have a normal life. They have a job, they have a couple of kids or whatever, they have a house, a family, whatever, but they're not really like, perhaps that's complete in and of itself, that little thing. And you never know all the details of someone's life, so it's hard to really say, okay, like what are the trials and tribulations they're overcoming, or are they really developing as a person, or are they just stagnant in the day-to-day things, perhaps not really answering the calls within them that maybe they've chosen to ignore for so long that they don't even hear it. But at the same time, you think about, it comes back to the idea of, okay, what classifies as a hero journey, and back to the idea of, okay, what, like how valuable are the small things, because you might look at the small things someone's doing and it doesn't immediately seem like a heroic act, but maybe to some extent it is. And yeah, it's interesting. Can everyone go on a hero's journey, be the hero of their own journey? I'd like to think it's everyone's destiny to.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening, because I feel like if it was possible, surely it would have happened by now, maybe. But I don't know, I guess you could argue, like, only in the last 100 years have we really gotten to a point of, like, at the level of medicine that we have now, people can like survive for long enough, and like the quality of life is getting better for everyone slowly. Some more so faster than others, but the quality of life for most people around the world is improving. Like, how long do we need to wait before everyone gets on the hero's journey? Or like, in my mind, I just don't think most people will get on it. Well, no, sorry, I don't think most people would complete the hero's journey.
Yeah,
myself included, there might be like small examples where I do certain things, but I don't know if I'd be this kind of person to go out and set up a business and like invest like life savings into it and then become successful. I just don't know.
it's hard. It's because it's not so black and white, like what the proper way is to live. It comes back to this whole ethical debate about what the proper way to live is. So you can't really put your finger on. So the way you're kind of phrasing it here is, okay, look at people and you don't think they'll complete their hero's journey, and perhaps you look at their lives as a whole and think, okay, you look at their lifespan and think, okay, have they completed their hero's journey? It's kind of hard to put your finger on, like, what would classify as a hero's journey practically in people's lives. Like, does it need to be this insane adventure for everyone, or would simply develop, like, perhaps you do just have a normal career and a job and a family and stuff, but you've obviously had challenges in your life and you've overcome those challenges, and you're in a place now where, like, you're kind of doing your basic duty as a person, although it might just be normal stuff. Perhaps you've obviously had to come away to be in the position where, like, you're supporting a family, for example, Like, is there something heroic about that, or just being like a competent person in your workplace, and people rely on you and you have responsibility and maybe contribute to making other people's lives better in a certain way? Like that's kind of seems like, it's hard to really how heroic a journey is that? Like what is heroism? Does it have to be like this grand gesture or this grand dramatic adventure, or can it just be maybe like I think some people call people like everyday heroes, the ones like unsung heroes, that they're just doing their bit, but it's
Mm.
that makes them a hero within themselves, kind of.
Yeah, I think, well, in my mind, the hero's journey is a big extravagant thing. This big call to adventure that's like it includes a lot of high risk, but that's not to diminish. Like when I said my point earlier, I wasn't trying to diminish, like you said, the everyday heroes,
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
people that do just grind out every day and provide for their family. If they have like a job they don't enjoy, they still go to it and show up just so they can earn money to put food on the table. But to me, like I feel like the hero's journey, like although the person that kind of goes to work every day and does the grinding, that's like a voluntary like choice because they can just say I'm not going to go to work. The hero's journey to me does involve this big change of like circumstances.
hmm
Like yes, you have unsung heroes that do the same things day in day out, even if they don't necessarily enjoy them. But the hero's journey seems like it should be this like changing of the environment or like changing of conditions where you like do truly go into the chaos. Because although you're an unsung hero, you're going into the chaos of border every day, whereas you're not getting necessarily going into the chaos of the unknown.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah. So perhaps this hero's journey that we're talking about, like perhaps you could live like a good life, a normal life, but it wouldn't really qualify as a hero's journey, which maybe makes the question of, oh, can everyone go on a hero's journey? Well, I guess like if you could just like lower down a hero's journey to just doing like the right thing on a daily basis, then of course everyone could. But it's a more interesting question: can everyone go on this adventure, taking on great risk, but from a calling inside, but ultimately go on to reap the benefits from that? Can everyone do it? I don't know. Maybe it comes back to, like I think I said, the similar questions we've asked each other in the talking about sort of the higher man concepts. Like, can everyone become a higher man? And my response was, I think everyone probably can, but not everyone will.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, maybe that applies here as well. But
Yeah,
should everyone do it? I don't know.
I mean, you could get into a bit of like maybe it's a bit risky to say, but like going back to like Nietzsche and like the idea of the master and the slave morality, he kind of implied, well, from what I understood, is like you need a master to create this vision and take the opportunity to like build the society into a better future. But that is only that's only going to happen if you have these slave moralists, or like if you have these slaves. Let's say, for example, like you're not going to be able to build these huge transformations in the world without having people at the bottom doing the dirty work.
Mm,
And like, if everyone's a hero, would that kind of suppose that everyone's a master, and then we have no slaves? Like, those words are a bit like I don't really want to
yeah,
use those words, but I
yeah,
don't know what the words at the moment. Like, do you know what I mean? Like my mind is a lot of life comes down to hierarchies, and there's always going to be fewer people at the top than the bottom. So in my mind, there's always going to be fewer heroes than people that aren't heroes.
yeah. Thinking about it, I feel like, yeah, not everyone does have to take on a hero's journey. and most people don't. I feel like most people do actually settle for a subpar life. They maybe have ambitions beyond what they're currently doing, and I feel like I've maybe shied away from putting it like this because it is quite blunt, and you wouldn't want to rule people out, but you do look at the world. You do just look at the people. You do just look at people. Like if you just observe people's lives, like they live normal lives. Most people just live normal lives. They don't take on great ambitions. They've probably had some ambitions within that they've had calls to adventure which they haven't accepted. Perhaps the default is actually, and it would look to be this, that the default is people don't accept the calls to adventure.
Yeah.
Is that necessarily wrong of them? I don't know, but it does seem that people sacrifice. People aren't willing to sacrifice the good for the great. Maybe that's the distinction, and the hero's journey is one of greatness. But then I think about in this conversation I've been trying to think about people, like the type of people I admire, and maybe we could talk specifically about them. Like let's say Joe Rogan. He's obviously someone who's highly achieved, and he's done a lot of things, and then we can say, yeah, he's a hero to many people. I think he is a very, like, he's a great person. He's like, he's not just a good person living an average life. He is a great person. And you look at what he's done in his life, like, okay, what exactly is the hero's journey there? Well, it started off, he was a martial artist in Taekwondo, and he gained a sort of level of success through taking on that apprenticeship, and then he branched out into other things. But realistically, like, you look at the timeline, you look at like what he's done throughout his life on the week-to-week basis. Well, he turned up to training every day, just a normal thing. He decided to be a comedian, so he went to some comedy shows. He was an actor for a little bit, so he just took on whatever gigs he could get. And then we look back at this big picture and you see this super successful guy, and you're like, yeah, this is like greatness. Like, there's certainly greatness there. But you look at throughout his life, it's not just one arc of achieving something. And maybe I think about also someone like Andrew Huberman, who's someone who I admire a lot. You look at his life and he's just, he's gone through academia, and like, he's got this podcast now, and he's educating lots of people. But so I would consider him a great person.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is what the hero's journey is. Like, it's a path to greatness. Will everyone achieve greatness?
Right.
No.
Maybe it's over a lifespan rather than a few years at a time.
Yeah. And you look at someone like Andrew Huberman, even, I feel like, is a better example, because it doesn't seem like anything he's done in particular is that exceptional. But like, his podcast is like a really big, unique thing now. But even before that, it probably, like, if I knew about him, like, I'd probably think, damn, this guy's, like, he's got his shit together. He's got a good life, and he's moving forward and aiming up.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he started off quite troubled. Like, I think he had quite a troubled childhood.
Yeah.
And then he ended up going to university, not doing very well, but then kind of switched up when he was there, and then just became this academic.
Yeah.
So would the call to adventure start then?
Yeah. Well, you could look at that and think those trials and tribulations he's overcome. There's been ups and downs there, and that is a hero's journey within itself. So yeah, but that's a small scale thing, because okay, that's a hero's journey within himself. He got his shit together and he became a professor. But like, so yeah, I mean, that's a hero's journey there, but it's not like an exceptional thing. Like, it is still like a relatively normal career. You look at his life; he has a pretty normal life, but there's still greatness within that. But yeah, so perhaps whatever you're doing, even if you do follow a relatively normal path, like that, aiming towards greatness, doing the best that you can, overcoming the challenges that are in front of you, and seeing what you can make of it. Like, that's the that's heroic within itself. And perhaps you just don't know about people's lives enough to realize that they are a hero in some way, that they have overcome things and achieved things which would make them a hero. But you maybe look at most people's lives and think they're quite basic, just going with the flow of it. They're not answering a call to adventure which requires them to take on great risk. Like they're just going through life, preserving, going through the flow of things. But yeah, it's interesting to think about what sort of life path like does it. I don't like in discussing it now. It seems as if there's not a specific life path you need to take, but there is. But it's about the themes that underlie it. It's about responding to the calls to adventure, and going through this loop, no matter what kind of like context that it's in, and then over time, if you take on enough challenge and do this enough, then you can look at yourself, the things that you've done, the person you are now, and you think, yeah, this is like this is a hero's. This has been like heroic. The transformation and the improvement and the progression that's happened from what you've done. But not everyone does that. Certainly, not everyone achieves a level of greatness, even on like a small scale. It doesn't necessarily need to be a massive thing, but people can achieve greatness in small ways. But some people don't care about that, don't pursue that, which you can say what you want about it, but
yeah, I guess maybe as long as you feel like you're living a fulfilled life, then that might be the main thing that matters, not necessarily if you went on a hero's journey.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
It was interesting what you said about at the end there, like how over time you'll have these like incremental improvements that accumulate. Maybe like the hero's journey could be adapted to like the call, like it could be adapted in a way that where the call to adventure isn't necessarily something telling you that you need to go do something. Maybe it's something like telling you that you need to not do something. Like it's the call to adventure could be like, I need to not go out drinking this weekend because it doesn't serve my body or like my bank very well. And it could be like the small things like that. Like the call to adventure could even be something as simple as I need to go do this homework so I get it done and I can get a good grade. Or I need to go do this preparation for like a job I have next week or whatever. Rather than being like a call to adventure where you have to go out into the unknown.
I mean, those things seem like good things to do, but they don't seem like a real call to adventure. Like perhaps because some people, maybe people who aren't particularly ambitious, they don't have that call to adventure, which is the feeling of discontent inside, particularly if the external circumstances of their life don't demand too much of them. Like obviously they need to, like they might have the things sorted, they have a job, they have a relationship, they don't want to have kids or whatever. There's maybe nothing exceptional there, and they're satisfied with that. So in their satisfaction, they don't have the urge within to sacrifice their current order and go through the trials and tribulations of the hero's journey. That they're content, and you can't really knock those sort of people.
No, but I guess you can't really knock anyone because who will be to do that.
Yeah, you can't really judge people for that. But then, like, if okay, so you can't say that's good or bad, or they shouldn't live their lives like that. But if you ask the question, like, is that a hero's journey or not? Well, obviously not. But
yeah. I didn't get any idea of what Joseph Campbell thought about the hero's journey. If he thought it's applicable to everyone's lives, or if he thought only a small subsection of like the population would truly take it and complete it. We're not too sure what his ideas were on it.
Yeah.
But one of the things is like you as yourself is not the final term of your being, which is quite nice. So maybe he did believe it applies to everyone, and that it could be simplified to smaller scales from these big like biblical stories or like superhero movies.
Mhm.
Everyone can go on these small transformations.
It does seem like everyone, because I feel like everyone resonates with hero stories. Like
Mm.
basically, I mean, I guess there's a few archetypal themes that encompass basically all kind of movies and narratives and literature and everything. And the hero's journey is certainly a key one, and basically everyone resonates with that in some way. So perhaps everyone does have that the urge within. They are connected to that narrative
Yeah,
because there is something fundamental about it, but
yeah, it's
not necessarily
innate
mean they act on it.
mm.
Maybe it's important to realize that, you know, like this types of thing, the hero's journey, there's no guarantee that the hero's journey will happen. There's no guarantee that you'll accept the call to adventure. Like there's every possibility that you you'll have the call to adventure, you'll have feelings of discontent within, you'll have dreams and desires. But if you don't take the action to go and do those things, which most people probably don't, at least to some extent, like that, it's not just going to happen. I feel like in that way, it has to be a voluntary decision. It's not handed to you. Like if it was handed to you, there would be nothing great about it. Like the fact that makes it important is that you always have the choice. Um, and perhaps because it's difficult, most people won't make that choice. They'll choose comfort. But maybe most people don't. Maybe most people are striving for better, even if it's in small personal ways. But it's
Mm.
interesting to think about. And like the point I was making there is in realizing that it's not guaranteed. You need to realize that if you want better, if you want to achieve these dreams within you, you need to take it upon yourself. You need to take responsibility for that. And yeah, don't just expect it to happen because it doesn't happen for everyone. That must be the way that it is.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be such a weird world if like everyone did go on the hero's journey and completed it.
That would be a
Would it
good
be better
one.
or worse?
I think it would be better. I feel like people realizing the potential within them is ultimately a positive thing, but it comes back to this whole thing of values. So if someone realizes their own highest values, that might be in direct conflict to someone else's. Um, but yeah, in terms of like, yeah, so it's your choice to take on the hero's journey. Like there's a scale where people there are some people who are content, they don't take on massive risks, but they also handle their responsibilities, and they're kind of in this middle space. There are people who are on the low bottom side where they they don't they fall into their vices, like drug addicts or people who just don't amount to anything and who ultimately die like maybe a tragic lonesome death. Like a drug addict is an example of that. Like there's no redemption really, it's just a tragedy. Whereas, and then on the other side of that, that's kind of the hero's journey, which, part of the hero's journey is the rejection of vices. Whereas like for the people who go the other way and whose lives ultimately end in tragedy with no redemption, like their vices took control of them. So yeah, I think it has to be the case that maybe it's possible for everyone, but that probably most people won't.
Yeah, going down to that distribution, most people will be in the middle of that curve. There'll be some people at the bottom and then some people at the top.
Yeah, but I would also really like to believe that that everyone does have it within, that everyone has the potential for greatness within them. And if they take
I think they do.
then they realize that. I think everyone should, like, we talk about beliefs and we don't know if that's true or not, but perhaps to believe that is the best, like whether it's true or not, maybe believing that is the best way to be, because that will allow you to do it within yourself. If you believe that you have greatness within you, then you'll go further than you ever would with if you didn't. And it's like I spoke about the Andrew Huberman thing where it said you get more dopamine if you think that there's a reward at the end of doing something, even if it's the exact same task, but you don't believe there's a reward. That's how dopamine works. So in order to motivate yourself, you need to believe in yourself. And there's this whole thing, you know, about the power of belief. And I do think belief is extraordinarily powerful. And yeah, everyone should try and believe that they have greatness within them, but they should also understand that they need to take on the call to adventure voluntarily, even if it means sacrificing their comfort and parts of themselves which maybe they like in a certain way but are holding them back.
Yeah, that's well put.
I wanted to talk about, because I've thought about, like, I think about my jiu-jitsu journey and my pursuit of getting good at jiu-jitsu, and these times often, like I've spoke about in the past on the podcast, how like it was in the second episode, I was talking about how, like, you look at the Cain and Abel story and basically it's about your response to the world not rewarding you for what you want. And you know, at the moment, like, so the call to adventure was my initial curiosity with jiu-jitsu, and part of me inside thinking, yeah, I could be good at this and this is an interest of mine. And then I started doing it for however long, and then, like, when we made that second episode after the last comp, like, I lost all my matches, and that was like maybe the crisis in some respect. Like that was like that rock bottom type of thing.
Mm.
And then since then, you know, I've done more competitions, and I've got another one this weekend, but I've been like training every day and I've been working really hard. So that goes back to kind of, okay, there's this vision of what you could be. But it's about the daily actions that you take. And so yeah, I've been working hard every day, and I've been doing better. I've done better in competitions before, and I hope that, you know, I really do better this weekend. And well, I mean, obviously I want to do better, but ultimately, even if I don't do well this weekend, the journey continues, and eventually, because I've taken on the challenge, I should get to the point that I'm aiming to get to. This is on a very small scale. Like, I'm still a white belt, so I'm looking at going from the last couple of years, going from starting jiu-jitsu to winning white belt competitions, and obviously that's on a very small scale. That would be an achievement for me. That, I mean, it would mean a lot to me because of the, you know, the ups and downs of like losing the matches and not really feeling my abilities progressing, and then making the sacrifices and training every day and stuff. But that's like a very small scale. So maybe in my lifetime, like, I'd need to go through that sort of arc 1,000 different times in different areas of my life. But then, you know, when I'm 50, I'd look back and think of the things I achieved. I think, yeah, that's like, it was because I took on these challenges that I managed to get to the point of greatness, which, you know, would be pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think when you get older, you probably value jiu-jitsu the most? Maybe not the most, but like top three. Like, let's say you've got like family, business, or like financial situation,
Career and whatever, yeah.
friends, and like social life, and then like jiu-jitsu, and then maybe like, I don't know, other things you could think of. Do you think you'll value that the most, or?
It's hard to say.
Well, obviously your values will change as you get older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it might be a thing of like for the next 5, maybe even 10 years, like that is the ultimate thing I care about. But then I may get to a point with it where I think, you know what, like I've reached the level, I've satisfied the discontent within me that's caused me to start the journey in the first place. And at that point, like you could look at that as a journey being complete, and perhaps that lasts a lifetime, but perhaps in 10 years time I decide, you know what, like I'm at the level, I think I've got everything out of this which I've hoped to find. Now it's time to, find something different. So yeah, I don't know, but it's obviously a big thing on my mind at the moment, and maybe just pursuing specific things like that. Like you've got this big vision and you want to improve, like doing that regardless of what it is, like build your character through doing that, and that's the most important thing. So regardless of what it is, but yeah, hopefully I'll be
Just
pretty good in jiu-jitsu in 10 years. That's my aim.
yeah, could be a black belt by then.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
That'd be
I don't know black belts personally. Yeah, so I don't know any black belts personally as like mates, but it'd be pretty cool if like you, Ben or Mike's just end up becoming a black belt.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, my mate's a black belt.
yeah. Well, I having this conversation with my coach this morning about how, I mean, I started training with him like a bit over 2 years ago. And he was talking about how, because I met him through the uni sessions, and I, then I've been training at the gym loads for it. And he's like out of all the original uni lot that were here 2 years ago training, like you're the one that's still here. I mean, it's on a small scale, like I'm still a white belt, but I mean, I've definitely been improving a lot, especially recently. And he was like you're still here. And that's like the biggest thing. Like you see so many people come and go. Like he was saying, uh, there was some guy that he ran into recently, and he's just got his black belt. I think he said he ran into him recently, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember when we were both blue belts at the same time. But then he took like however many years off training, and then they see each other again. It's like, oh right, this is what time does. And yeah, he talks about people, like a lot of people he sees, like he'll speak with people and he'll be like, remember that guy who was just like insanely talented from years ago, but just not all of them stay with it. So, and yeah, like in a podcast with Lex Friedman, John Danaher said, I think he said that the most important attribute for getting good at jiu-jitsu is perseverance. And yeah, to be honest, I don't really know where I was going with that, but yeah, I guess hopefully I'll get a black belt just from like the consistency. It's not even about the black belt; it's about the abilities and getting that good. Um, like the black belt, because there is a criticism that you turn up for a certain amount of years and you will probably get your black belt, even if you're not all that. Like from certain places, you will still get your black belt, which I guess is fine. But to have that perseverance to become the best you can be over the years, even when life gets in the way, like that's how you get good at things. And yeah, so hopefully I will get my black belt, because I haven't given up yet, and I don't plan on doing so.
Yeah, yeah. I think the hero's journey is definitely very applicable to the jiu-jitsu world. Like I remember I started like a year ago, but just like 30 months, 14 months ago now, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
And, like just felt myself the first month you're just kind of fucking trying to survive and you just get tapped out all the time. And then like you kind of get a bit better where you survive a bit longer, and then you start seeing some openings and you go for them. But then I just got to this point of stagnation where I was just like turning it up and just was just not improving at all for ages. And I just felt so demotivated, and I just didn't go for like a month because I was just like, fucking don't do this anymore. But then you go after, like, that's kind of part of the hero's journey. You get into that crisis mode, and then something in kind of maybe, well, I think it's probably you, Ben and Michael, seeing you over Christmas kind of like inspired me to get back into it, and that like faith was kind of built from inspiration. And then I do get back into it, and you do improve, and then you like start being able to tap people out, and then like you just, I mean, it's just great once you get past that like first mode of like, oh fucking hell, this is so like draining because I'm not even improving.
Yeah.
And once you get past that and you get to the point of like seeing the improvements and like the actual benefits of it, it's just amazing. But I'm sure there'll be another point where like let's say you get to like brown belt, like years ahead, people like might be brown belt for years because like they just like aren't improving on those little things that you need to be a black belt. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
long journey.
Yeah, because I mean, you say like, yeah, it's good to doing slightly better, but then like, okay, you start and then you're shit, and then you do slightly better and you start hitting some moves on other white belts. But then what happens when you take on a blue belt? And then once you get to blue belt, you take on a purple and a brown belt or a black, and it goes on like there's never. Perhaps one day you will reach. You won't quit before you reach a point where I spoke about reaching a point where you're like, you know what, I think I've got everything out of this which I could have ever wished for. Like not quitting before that point and not allowing life to get in the way and stop you before you reach that point. I think is extremely important. But yeah, and I think it comes back to the power of belief. Like, we had the conversation about the competition on the second podcast, and I said things about comparing it to Cain and Abel's story because I've been training for a while, and I just thought, I'm just shit considering all things considered. I'm just not happy with my progress. But I decided, you know what, in the face of the world not rewarding me for my efforts, I'm going to put more effort in. And and it didn't always seem like, it's not as if I've achieved massive success or anything, but at the time, I chose to have faith in the fact that if I put the time in, that I would progress. And that's what I've done. And I know I can tell my abilities have progressed so much in that time, but I look back and think like the only reason I've been able to progress is because I was like I believe that I could, and um and yeah, there is big power to self belief there, and yeah, perhaps we could do a whole episode on the power of self belief. Like, there's a lot of studies and shit showing like even physiological things, like the amount of weight you put on from eating certain foods is affected by your beliefs about them. Or the amount of progress you make from exercise is like the shit you think this is very physical. Like the studies showing that your beliefs about it actually has a massive impact on the impact on like the effect of things. So yeah, but that belief is definitely an important part of the hero's journey, and I mentioned it a couple of times, but it comes back to like if you believe there's a reward at the end, then you'll have more dopamine from taking the actions that move you towards it. So maybe that's the key part that takes the abstract vision to the single daily steps that you need to take, is having that vision, that belief, and then associating daily little tasks which seem, it's hard to see the long-term progress, but you can get the positive emotion and the motivation from doing those things because you've associated that with the bigger vision. And then obviously throughout your journey, there'll be the highs and lows associated with the hero's journey. But yeah, it works on all scales. Like, so you have the smallest scale, the daily actions to get you there. You have a slightly larger scale, like the specific phase that you're in. Perhaps you're in a phase of like you could be in like the crisis type of phase where you feel like you failed and you really need to buckle down. You could be in the phase of confronting the big kind of goal that you've had, or I mean, and then at the full scale you see the full hero's journey, and then beyond that is all a series of hero's journey. Like for me on my jiu-jitsu journey, like this is a mini journey going from a few months ago losing all my matches to hopefully doing way better in white belt competition. So that's like one arc within itself. But ultimately, it might take 20 of them, 50 of them before, in 20 years time, whatever, or 10 years time, it could, I don't know how things will play out, but it might take 20 of them before I get to that point. I think, you know what, like the complete here is the journey. I've got everything out of this I want to. I move on to something else, or maybe I just love it so much, and that moving on to something else would be building upon that. Like for example, in jiu-jitsu, like a lot of people, like this next step after they've achieved the goals, they've achieved everything they wanted to achieve in the sport, is to try and provide that to other people by being a coach. So maybe that's onwards, or perhaps it's completely different, but that's like multiple. That's the building of these hero journeys over time, which is built upon your daily actions. So yeah, it all comes together nicely. Actually, I feel like before this episode, thinking about the hero's journey, some of these questions about how it fits into life practically, I wasn't too sure about, but discussing it, made it seem a bit clearer for me. Good.
Yeah, definitely jiu-jitsu. And I'm sure you can apply it to university as well. But yeah, I guess what's the thing that kind of makes people come out of the crisis on the other side? Like in the thing, it kind of referenced like it was this unknown possession of like energy or strength or creativity or even like faith. It was like, is faith maybe one of the more important things that helps people come out of the ordeal and out of the crisis?
Yeah,
faith is like the belief in a better future, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. There is that. I think there is that faith, because if you don't, comes back to belief. If you don't believe, if you believe regardless of what I do, the rewards on the other side aren't going to be what I want, or aren't going to be worth doing, then you'll never take the actions to get there. So I think it is a crucial part, but definitely not the only part. And perhaps that strength comes from, if you have faith, then it's a decision of faith to take the actions to try and get to that level. But yeah, and also like the descent into, like when you're in that crisis, that's hitting rock bottom, that's being in the belly of the whale, the darkest place. And that's where your potential is realized, because that's where the biggest challenge possible presents itself, which allows you to bring out parts of you which, had the challenge not been so big, would never have needed to come out. But when you voluntarily take on that challenge, that's where that inner potential comes from.
Yeah. Do you think that when you're in the belly of the beast, like let's say, it's not your job to just simply get out of it, but you need to kind of maybe like linger in there for a little bit and like search around so you can find what you're truly looking for?
Yeah, because I guess,
does the act of like just trying to get out of it straight away help you find what you're looking for, or do you kind of need to let yourself sit in there for a while?
yeah, maybe you need to save. I mean, because it's in the Pinocchio story where he goes into the belly of whale, but he goes there to rescue his father. Yeah, and yeah, that's what he does. So yeah, I guess you need to, in that state of crisis, you need to. It's not guaranteed that escaping it will necessarily save, will necessarily give you the results that you want. Maybe there's something you need to find in there that you can bring out. I don't know, to be fair, it's very abstract. I'm not sure I've got the clearest idea there, to be honest. So in the crisis, so faith is one of the things, but you spoke about, like, what was the thing you mentioned, some sort of inner, like you realize a certain inner strength. What was that idea? Like there's an inner strength.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
So approaching. Oh yeah. So you approach the cave, and then like when you get into the whole ordeal, those moments, it kind of looks like the future is in disarray, and like you're in the moments of despair. But then the hero finds like hidden parts of themselves, and they call on an inner power that they didn't know they possessed, and that power could be like energy, creativity, strength, or faith. Yeah, I think there was a question along the lines of that, maybe.
yeah. That's what I wanted to ask you. Like the inner, because you kind of, I guess it ties back to like the challenge making you realize that genetic potential. But yeah, I just wanted you to explain that back, like the inner strength part, because I wasn't sure, because when you asked me about the crisis, I wasn't sure whether I really covered that type of thing. But yeah, do you think there's any, like you asked me where, so what causes that? Like what do you think, is there something inherently about the crisis that causes that inner strength to reveal itself? Like where does that come from?
Uh, it seems like most humans have the capability of great things, like you were saying earlier. It's just that most humans maybe choose not to achieve those things because they're difficult. And I think when it comes to like the crisis or the ordeal, as long as the crisis or ordeal is, let's say, how do I word it? As long as that crisis or an ordeal is just beyond what is achievable for you, I think that's where the inner strength that's hidden can be found.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's too far beyond what you're capable of, you're not going to be able to stretch yourself that extra 5% to reach the goal, let's say. Whereas if it's only like a few steps away, you can stretch yourself. You can like it's close enough from your it's the crisis is close, like the goal is close enough from your exhausted abilities that you can still see it. So you do stretch yourself that extra bit, and that hidden part of yourself comes out. Whereas if your exhausted abilities get you to this point, and the point that you need to be at is so far beyond what you can see, then like you don't get that inner strength.
Yeah.
So it needs to be something that is just beyond what is attainable.
I think that's a very practical way of looking at it. Like, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about, I think it's called like the proximal zone of development. People talk about like, I think that's where the phrase like being in the zone comes from. But it's basically, so on either side of the spectrum, you have, if something is too easy and not enough of the challenge, then it's boring. And if something's too difficult, then you won't be able to do it, and it'll be frustrating, and you'll give up on it. So having it in that range where it's difficult enough to push you, but not so difficult that you're incapable of it. And then yeah, that's a very good way of approaching challenges and trying to challenge yourself. Yeah, I think it works practically well.
Yeah, I guess it's just hard to know how much ability you do have before you go into that crisis, like present yourself with this ordeal. Especially when you hear like David Goggins say like people only give 40% of what they actually have in the tank. And it's like sometimes you're just doing your exercise and you're just like, this is like 100% of what I can give, but to him it's only 40%.
Yeah, maybe he's right.
He probably is. I'll probably be a little bitch.
Yeah, you got to conquer the inner bitch.
Yes.
Um,
We should carry them both. So
yeah, someone's got to, haven't they? Yeah. Any more thoughts for this episode? I think this might be the longest episode, to be fair. Anything else you want to go into? Because I think we've kind of covered everything.
yeah, I think we have covered pretty much everything that I wanted
It's a good deep
to talk
dive.
about. I mean, I guess maybe just refer back to what you said earlier about how it didn't really seem like a monomyth that was applicable to everyday life. It kind of seemed like something that was just for archetypical stories and superhero movies, let's say. But when you start talking about your jiu-jitsu career, like I definitely thought it could apply to mine as well, and it can apply to university. Like this hero's journey is something that can apply to everyday life. People can take it and use it to benefit their own lives. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
not trying to.
I think people should try to
Sorry,
do
go on.
that. Yeah, I think people should try to do that, and they should try and search out challenges. Like if they're complacent in their life right now, they'll probably benefit from finding some sort of challenge. Could be anything, but just deciding to go on that journey of improvement, trying to get better at something. And yeah, that's that call to adventure. But I guess if you're content and you don't really care to, then do your thing, man. We're just trying to figure shit out for ourselves, I guess. But I hope
Yeah,
it helps some people to yeah, maybe embrace more challenges in their lives.
yeah, even just small ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's basically it for this episode. So wrap it up, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, good looking competition this Saturday. Is it in Leeds?
Yeah, it's in
Or is
Leeds.
it? Good luck. Are you doing gi and no gi, or just?
I'm doing both.
Oh, well, I'm sure you do well.
Yeah.
If you don't curse out the world and like think fate's bad. But
Yeah.
if you want to do it, maybe I don't know. I won't be your preacher. But yeah, so it's currently 2:15. Same day, same date, obviously. Just over around 2 hours long, I think. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think episode about 2 hours. Yeah, good episode.
Good
Kind
episode.
of flew by there. Really need the toilet, so I want to go.
Yeah, my voice is hurting a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one, and some of the things you could take away would benefit you. And if you think that could happen, then do it. If not, who gives a shit? But yeah, get to us on Spotify. Give us a little like and subscribe, all that shit. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys. See you in a bit.